Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Manager Challenge Session 6. We're here with our CEO, Sid Sibrandy, to talk about all topics related to management and leadership. And there's a number of questions in the doc. The last 3 weeks, we've been talking about a whole host of topics related to leading teams, and we're excited to have Sid on board to answer some questions. So Adam, I'll hand it off to you for the first one there.
Sounds good. First, I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to meet with us and answer our questions. It's been awesome to see just how engaging, the C-suite and the executive team has been with, coming on board to answer questions and give us pointers there. But I was curious, with the company recently going public, how do you really balance the fiduciary duty of needing to be sales driven to appease, the street or investors, while also trying to keep the GitLab culture that the team and yourself have spent, nearly a decade building and developing, since they don't typically go hand in hand?
Thanks. Thanks for the question. Appreciate that. And I think our fiduciary duty is to grow the value of the company, both in the short term and the long term. And I don't think there's any particular. I don't think a sales culture. We have one culture at GitLab. It's not dependent on any department, and many people are involved with meeting short-term goals and long-term goals. There is a balance between long-term and short-term goals. And I think if you hit your short-term goals, it gives you the opportunity to invest long-term. And in the history of the company, before we were public, there were a few times where we had to rally to meet our short-term goals. And I think it's important to meet those because meeting those gives you the legitimacy to invest in the long term. I think so far we've not had to change how we think about short-term versus long-term. All the times that we really had to focus on the short-term were before we were a public company. And it might be that in the future we'll have another episode where we have to rally behind something, and it can be sales, it can be reliability, it can be security, and stuff might come on our way as a company, and we won't hesitate to make sure that we refocus our efforts to what's important to meet short-term things, so that we get the trust to invest in the long term.
Good stuff. I've got the next question. Thanks, Sid, for taking the time to answer these. What are 1 to 2 examples of traits from leaders who have shaped you that you now aspire to model to your direct reports?
I think one of the most important things I try to mimic is varying my style depending on the needs of my reports. Our lead independent board member, Godfrey, gave me the book Situational Leadership. I was familiar with the concept, but I wasn't surprised that he gave that, because he's really good at it. And I a blog post out with things I consider when delegating. And I think we called it a situational leadership blog. Maybe someone can link that. I think that's one of the most important things. And for the rest, many people who inspired me all the way to my first manager when I was an intern at Procter & Gamble. And I greatly admired that person's patience and warmth.
Thank you for that. Barker, you're up next.
I am next. During my CEO shadow, I noticed that the first 5 minutes of your one-on-ones are often spent with small talk, either a trip or a life event. And I found that surprising, even for you, that you would do that. Can you speak to the importance of this and how it plays into leading a remote organization?
Yeah, it's very easy to talk just about the business, and it feels efficient. And sometimes I barge right in, but most of the time I try to make sure that we have some we call it small talk, but it's the thing that creates big connections. It's if you don't do that, it starts feeling a bit transactional, and it's kind of fun to work with robots, with humans instead of robots. So let's make sure we appreciate that side of it.
Sweet, thank you.
That's our new slogan. Work with humans instead of robots. I like
Yep.
Yeah, I think you got the next
But
one.
I can see the downsides of such a campaign, especially if we start claiming some other companies have robots working in them. But
For sure.
thanks for that.
Yeah, so I noticed in a previous AMA that you mentioned that because of having days full of meetings, you often feel you're kind of working in a reactive rather than a proactive way. And I'd just be interested to hear, kind of as far as management is concerned, how the steps you take to proactively manage your reports.
Yeah, I think if I have a bigger thing I want to do, I try to make sure that I can kind of collaborate with someone else. And that can be like, hey, can we schedule a meeting to discuss this? That kind of creates time and space to work on it. I find it very difficult to kind of motivate myself to find 2 hours to type up a big document. So kind of I try to find out who it's close to and then collaborate with that person. And then the other thing I do to be proactive instead of reactive is in my one-to-one agendas with my reports, we start with performance management, then feedback, then vision, and then hallway. We go to the hallway section, the last, and those tend to be the reactive things instead of the proactive things.
Got it. Thanks.
Hi, Sid. I wanted to find out how you go about building trust at the team and individual level, and how this approach directly impacts motivation as well with those individuals and teams that report to you.
Yeah. We touched on something earlier, which was like facilitating and organizing informal communication. There's many things that go into trust. I think always welcoming feedback is super important. Welcoming criticism. This is me, you have to agree with the criticism per se, but you can still be thankful for someone for voicing it. Encouraging people to figure it out amongst themselves if possible. Encouraging people to raise issues to a group level instead of like being the intermediary. Those are some things that come to mind.
I think you're next.
Hi, Sid. At previous companies, Oracle being a bigger one, I noticed there was a challenge with recruitment teams or first-line managers that had stretch targets, and finding the right people and keeping the right culture in the business during periods of high growth. I'm just curious, from your perspective, given our hiring target, what's your thoughts on the key things to think about and how we could work to help to address that?
Yeah, thanks. It's a very important subject. I think historically, we've done a very good job of not dropping the bar to meet our targets. I've thought a lot about how you could measure that, and I concluded that it's pretty hard to measure whether something like that is going on. I think one indication tends to be kind of the last title of the people joining. Like if that was higher, equivalent, or lower, then they would get a GitLab. It's an imperfect measure, but be interested whether in aggregate that is a signal. I think that the two biggest departments in sales and engineering, I've seen more like raising of the bar than lowering of the bar over time, over the last few years. But I'm the last person to know. So if you see anything, and it goes for everyone in this call, do let me know. And if people want to speak up right now, like what are you observing?
I'll chime in. I think we've talked a little bit during this program is that some folks, they were hired to do a certain job. And since we've grown so much, their role has really expanded. So how do you build the skills to close the gap? I see that as being a challenge as we move forward as well. Like how do we raise the level of our current team members and then bring in the right people to help us scale?
For sure. Like if you're growing as fast as we do, then even just staying in the same place requires more and more skill.
Sure.
Thank you, Christina.
Sure. Hi, said this question relates to the previous one a little bit about culture as well. So as new leaders come in, so say, a director leaves or, senior manager leaves and comes in, I've been hearing just over coffee chats and just water cooler conversations that it's a bit, people are finding it difficult to encourage, I don't want to use the word enforce, but to remind people that they report to work the GitLab way and enact our values. And it's not diversity or transparency, it's more operational. So for example, I've had, senior leaders send internal, emails to a group of people tasking them or, not following agendas. So just start kind of letting the conversation move in different directions or slack best practices. And I know that you are a great example of always very, kindly and openly asking people. But I think when it's a new manager and you're reporting to them, it's difficult, especially when it happens over, in multiple situations. You don't always want to be that person reminding them. So do you have any advice on how, we can work through that?
No, I see the problem, and I find it harder to correct or educate board members on GitLab best practices than my reports too. Like I think it's easier to give feedback to your reports than to your manager, because they're in a position of power. So I don't see an easy solve for that. What we could do is in the onboarding say, hey, note the 5 pieces of feedback around GitLab communication style that people have given you. This way, you're no longer bugging them to change. You're like, oh, thank you, I needed one of those. And if they don't get them, they'll actively solicit it. Like, hey, does anybody have any feedback about how I fit into the GitLab communication style? Yeah, stop using @channel in the Slack channel, please.
Yeah, that's one of them.
It is a channel. People read it or don't read it, but
Thank you. Great suggestion.
Use Slack threads. Also said that's a phenomenal example. Thanks for that.
Great. So who's going to add it to the onboarding, or at least make that MR to send to the people group?
I'll do it. Since L&D owns onboarding, we're taking it over.
Okay. Thanks for that, Josh.
Josh, I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Thanks, Darren.
And let's make it specific about communication styles, and also maybe have the top 5 faux pas or something like that, because we kind of know what they are.
Yeah, we definitely do. I see them every day.
Cool. Thanks for that, Christina. Christine.
This is a great question, Christina. Hey, Sid. So my question is about how do you strike the balance between providing guidance to one of your team members and giving them the space to let them make their own mistakes? I think it stems from Godfrey's AMA and about being a board member versus operator. I found that really interesting to hear about I know that's not exactly the same because like in one case, you know, he's a board member versus like it's your manager, but like kind of similar threads. I think that's something that I personally struggle with, and you know, because you just want to help, you want to try to, but I think sometimes letting people make their own mistakes is actually the best thing that you can do, and for their personal development. So curious to hear how you think about that.
Yes, like any answer in business school, it starts with it depends, but I'm going to get more specific. Don't worry. This is a delegation question, right? So if you delegate, like how much room do you give people to make their mistakes? And it depends on the situation. And I think I've collected the world's longest list of things you could look at when delegating. So how proficient is the report? If you know the report is super junior, you shouldn't let them make big mistakes, right? You should help them and first have them be successful. Do they have the specific skills for this tasks? Right? You might hire Christine Lee and then give her marketing jobs, and then you should help her a bit more, although she picks it up very, very quickly. So my own skills, like be aware of to what extent you can help, like you might be leading them in the wrong direction. We had a call about marketing voiceovers earlier, and I don't know a lot about voiceovers, and people on the call didn't know a lot, so I didn't say a lot. How important is it? Like, if it goes sideways, to what extent does that affect the company? Like, if I don't know, we can't publish our quarterly earnings, that's a much bigger thing than if we wasted $10 on a gift that wasn't received. What's the urgency? Like, did they have time to redo the task if it didn't work? How many opportunities will I have to chime in with that person? So like I can give someone a more generic goal and like go figure it out, get back to me if we have like 3 check-ins along the way. But if like the next time they're up a podium and doing it, like there's no opportunity to course correct. What's the learning opportunity? Like if I'm doing a live stream or if I'm doing it in a group setting, well, there's different things. Like sometimes you make the correction so other people also know, like, hey, you shouldn't mention people in a Slack channel. And you're not just communicating with that person, you're kind of communicating it to a broader audience. What's a reporting relationship? I feel very comfortable giving feedback to a report. I don't feel very comfortable giving feedback to someone 3 levels away from me, like an IC at GitLab, and you get the big boss saying the XYZ. That's very much more impactful. So you should be more careful. Time available, time needed. Like if we need a video out next week and it's a very tight timeline, you might be much more directive in what your idea for it is. How much better is it than the current solution? We're humans, not robots. So what's my emotional state? How much does this particular thing bother me? Is it like still some things on the pricing page are not clickable? Then I might be a bit more directive because that should have been solved by now. How long does it take to give the feedback? These feel similar. So feedback effort. This is not how long, it's like how much effort is it to formulate the feedback? Like how much, I don't know, sometimes it hurts your brain a bit. So maybe the shadows can reformulate that. What if they already received before? Like, have I given the same feedback? Are they like making the same mistake? How are they doing? Sometimes people are like, with your report from the Ukraine, I'd be very careful giving negative feedback today. Can I point them to metrics? Like most of the time we try to like automate feedback or kind of make it a continuous process. Look at our key meetings, like people present how they're doing according to all the key metrics. I don't have to say like, hey, those numbers should be higher. Like the graph is laying that out for them, and they are voicing over what they're going to do about it. Relationship duration, like how much credibility have I built, but also how long am I still going to work? And do they have all the resources? I have someone that who's kind of doing 2 jobs at the same time. Like, I'm not going to criticize their work. They're doing much more than they're supposed to do. So those are some things that factor into that.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks.
I just had an extra question.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I just had a question I just thought of, so I haven't written it very well. But part of our values is obviously the importance of iteration and speed. And I was thinking, in your role as CEO, I imagine that most of those decisions are actually quite impactful and important. So in your own leadership journey, like, was there a step to overcome for you to maintain that speed, even though each of these decisions would typically lend to increased stress and a sense of responsibility? Just curious if you could speak to that.
I think what I'm most often doing, or what I really like doing, is helping other people in the company to iterate, to make something smaller. Like, we have a problem with product analytics. We rate limited it. Should we communicate that we're deprecating the category? No, just communicate that you rate limited the thing. Like, don't make it a bigger decision. So I think most of the time I help people kind of make it smaller. Should we start enforcing compute and storage at the same time? No, well, they don't ask the question, otherwise you'll give the right answer. But like, untangling things, and most of the time it's the bunch up is in communicating, where we're trying to communicate everything at the same time. And it's much more expedient and much more targeted and relevant if we unbundle those.
Interesting. Thank you.
All righty. Well, Sid, I think that's it for the questions. I appreciate your time and joining us. It's always great hearing from you and your perspective through your experience. So thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the questions. Loved it.
Thank you,
Sid.
Sid.
Thank you. All right.
All right. That was great. Just real quick, before we wrap things up, I just want everybody to hopefully you enjoyed that. I thought that was pretty awesome hearing from Sid and crew. I'm gonna stop this recording.